Welcome to the show. This is your host, James Mackey. Really excited about today's episode. We are joined by Colleen Ferrell. Colleen, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, James. Good to be here.
Let's do it. So let's start off with your background. Could you share a little bit about yourself with everyone?
Yeah, of course. So I am currently the Chief People Officer for North America at BCW Global. We have a headcount of roughly 1,000 people in North America. And we are a public relations firm. So we focus on mostly corporate and public affairs, but we do have practices in brand and technology as well. So I am kind of broadly responsible for talent attraction and retention across North America. So basically everything that falls under the HR umbrella rolls up into me. So really everything around the employee life cycle, from talent acquisition to kind of, talent management, and even managing kind of the exit processes and all of that. And HR ops, all of that kind of is under my purview. I've got about 15 years or so of experience. And I went to Georgetown University for my master's degree in HR management.
All right, good stuff. Well, so one of the first topics that we talked about today is just going through like high-level thought leadership on best practices that you've learned over the past several years when it comes to people teams, possibly talent acquisition. What are some of the highest leverage focus points for somebody in your position, or for really, any executive that is focused on building great teams of people and engaging with great teams of people and ensuring that people are empowered to do their best work? Like, I would just love to hear some of the best practices from your perspective.
Sure. So it's interesting because I've worked at a number of different types of organizations, different sizes, but I think that there are some things that kind of are applicable kind of across the board. So one would be kind of investing in your systems, right? Your people team is only as good as your systems are. If you have good data, if you have systems and technology that you can leverage, that means you can have a lower headcount on your people team because they can leverage technology to kind of deliver really solid people programs. So that's probably one of the most important things. Another is ensuring that you're leveraging your people team in the right way. So I've seen so many times that, HR or people teams are seen as kind of like I complete my forms with them, or I can go to them and ask them benefit questions. And yes, the people team is there for that. But I think that kind of the real value is aligning your business strategy with the people strategy and executing on that strategy. And that's where your HR business partner should really be spending their time, not on the transactional stuff, so to speak. And then I would say probably one more would be kind of no focus on analytics or numbers or data. I feel like HR is an art and a science, and you need to be able to marry the two. And without kind of the analytics and the numbers and the data driving your decisions, you're kind of flying blind. So I would say that's another really important aspect. And the last one that I kind of will highlight too is ensuring that you have a succession plan for your people team or your CPO or your head of HR or whatever. I think oftentimes companies, will recruit externally, when in reality, particularly for CPOs, I think this would probably be a more applicable comment. Make sure you're hiring people and you're developing them so that way they can kind of take over for you in the event that you leave or retire or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of points to speak to here. I think we could talk about systems first. One of the things that you mentioned in the prep call that we had was related to having the right tech stack in place really will help a lot of the HR team move out of more of this transactional role and to focus more on the strategic aspects. I think that that's probably true of almost every department. That's something that we think about a lot in talent acquisition as well. And I'm sure that's something that
absolutely.
you're thinking about. Like we want to be building relationships and understanding priorities of our candidate pipeline and people in the pipeline, and really evaluating fit at a deeper level. And so what are some specific use cases there of technology that you've built out and things that you've tried to either automate or accelerate so that your people and talent acquisition teams can be more strategic and impactful in their role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think there's a few things that I've seen over time. So one, having a really strong HRIS in place. So basically that's your system where kind of all of your people data is kept. You should be able to, at any given moment, know what your population looks like, know what the makeup is of your population. If you have your HR teams kind of focusing on pulling that data and manually manipulating that data, that is a huge time waster. So I would say that's one thing that I've seen, is making sure that you have a really strong HRIS with really robust reporting capability. I think that's incredibly important. In terms, yeah.
Real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
Which HRIS do you use?
So at BCW, we are in the process. We have our kind of homegrown system, which is really great. But we are in the process of transitioning over into Workday. And, depending on the size of your company, that kind of will drive which direction you go in for your HRIS. I've also used Paycom, which was really fantastic at a much smaller firm. But it was great. Really liked it. And ADP also has some capability in some of its product offering. Again, the reporting and kind of the dashboards that are provided really help with being able to capture what your population looks like.
So that's so reporting is probably it's one of the primary evaluation drivers for looking at a system.
Yes. And ease of use for the team, right? Because it's one thing if you have this really amazing tech stack and it's really robust, but it takes your team forever to figure it out, or it's really clunky and tough to use, then it's not doing what you need it to do, right? So I would say that's probably number two, is how easy and what is the user interface and how friendly is it in order for your team to actually use the systems.
For sure. And so when you have the right systems built out, what are let's say on the HR side, what are some of the more impactful things that you are freeing up your people team to do? Where do you want them to be spending their time? I mean, I know there's different roles within the company.
Sure. Yeah. So I think in this, for this scenario, if we look at the HR business partner role, because I would say that pretty much every organization has that, either an HR business partner or an HR manager or an HR director. I would say that they should really be focusing on people. What is keeping your people in the organization? Where are they? What are the pain points? Are there any barriers to great work? Are they, what is your customer experience and how are you aligning your employee experience and your customer experience? So I like my team to focus on candidate experience, employee experience, and also just being a really streamlined, high performing team in the organization. So I really want them focusing on our talent and hyper focusing on our talent. Where are there gaps? Where are we not doing well? Where do we need to improve? And what is in the way of developing a really solid employee experience? How do we get to being an employer of choice?
Yeah, I love it. I would love to talk a little bit about the talent acquisition technology.
Yeah.
Is that still on the homegrown side, or what are you leveraging on the talent acquisition?
We currently use Workable on the talent acquisition side. And, I've used a number of different systems. I would say I have a few favorites. Probably we all do, right? What's your favorite?
Sure. Mine's Greenhouse.
Me too. I
really?
love Greenhouse. They're so good.
Yeah.
Really robust. They have amazing reporting. It's super easy to use because so another piece of leveraging technology is also ensuring that your employees can have some self-service aspect, right? And even in the talent acquisition space, right? You want to make sure that your managers are able to get into your TA system. So that way they can help review candidates or give feedback or whatever. And you make it really, really easy. So Greenhouse, I'm a huge fan. We use that at AKQA.
Yeah.
And they're just, and I think in certain pockets around WPP, who, that's the parent company, the holding company of BCW. I think they use Greenhouse, but I'm a huge fan.
Well, what's kind of cool is we're actually, so Daniel Chait, the co-founder and CEO, and we haven't officially announced this yet, but he's actually coming on, Greenhouse is coming on as a partner to the podcast. And Daniel's going to be
super
running.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm so pumped. Like, so Daniel's going to be running a quarterly recurring episode where it's going to be me, Daniel, and he's going to be bringing on a guest, like a really high caliber guest. And the three of us are going to be riffing on different topics, but yeah, that's pretty cool. So I've been working with the Greenhouse team and getting that set up. It looks like we're going to be giving this a try. He's already come on the show.
Yes,
as a guest,
I heard. Yes, I listened to that because again, huge fan of Greenhouse, which like that might be the, that's such an HR thing to say, like, oh, right. But it's a really, really solid ATS.
Yeah. So for everybody tuning in, like, just make sure to check this out. I think we'll probably release the first of the series in September, and I'll be doing an official announcement soon, but we'll do September and then we'll do one toward the end of Q4. But that's going to be, I'm excited about that one.
Super cool. That's great.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I think like let's get into succession planning. I'm really big into this as well. I think you got to be like, companies have to be very careful about knowledge gaps. Yes. And it's important it can be incredibly difficult at any level of the organization, but if you do lose a leader, you don't want any of the process to live in the leader's head, and that's the only place it resides, because even in the transition period of the last 2 to 3 weeks, it's really, in my experience, like impossible to get everything that you need.
It's not enough time. It's not enough time.
I've been hyper diligent about like requiring process documentation for everything. I mean, like to the point of like, if I had to hand somebody for their role a process doc and I couldn't answer any questions, that it's like a step-by-step guide to how everything is being done. And of course, it's never going to be perfect, but the idea is that there's like monthly or quarterly updates as things evolve to outline that in the process documentation. I'm curious if there's now, but hearing you think like about hiring plans, one thing that we haven't done that maybe we should do is know what the recruiting process would look like for those roles as well. I mean, I guess if they were open before, we would have that knowledge. But anyways, curious to get your thoughts on succession planning, how you go about doing it.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. Like, so ultimately, particularly if you're leading a function, any function, really your responsibility is to build out the function and make sure that it can run independently of you, the leader. That's like bare minimum, right? So totally agree with you on ensuring that you have really solid process documentation, you're sharing information, or even, like pulling people from your team into conversations. Like, I can't stress how important it is to hire really smart, strong people in behind you. And don't be threatened by it. Right? Like, make sure that you're bringing in people that can do your job, because you're not going to be there forever. And your responsibility is to, in my opinion, leave the function better than we found. Always. Yeah. So totally agree with you on the, process documentation. And in terms of succession planning, identifying people on your teams that can kind of, elevate into that role and figuring out what they need in order to do that, right? Because so often we see companies that a leader leaves and they have to go out and find somebody to replace them, which probably means you need to look at your talent, right? Do you have the right people in place? And what are your plans for the team that's in place, for your high potentials? How have you evaluated your staff and done your talent mapping to determine kind of who could potentially succeed that role and how long it would take them?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is really crucial. Let's get into, it can be difficult, right? So I think how do you go about evaluating team members that can move up? So like, let's say you're looking at people that could potentially move up to your role, or like the tier underneath, like you're talking to your directors, like, or your managers. And from the perspective of like, hey, if we move you into the next stage in your career here and level you up to a manager, to a director role, we need to know the players that can move up into the management role. Is this like partially done through, performance reviews? I mean, how do you, so is that the primary structure for how you evaluate who can move up, or how do you get that info?
I think it's a combination, and I think in every organization it's different, right? Like what works for BCW might not work elsewhere. But I think for us, a combination of performance reviews, and then also there's something called the 9-box. Have you heard of this? Where there's like performance on one axis and potential on another. And those who have high potential and their high performance generally are your what we call hypos. But I think, so I love the 9-box. There's a lot of criticism of the 9-box, which is fair, but I think it tends to be really useful. As long as you're kind of defining what does high performance look like and what does high potential look like, right? So,
Sure.
So if I'm saying someone on my team has high potential for what? High potential to become the CPO, high potential to become an SVP. What does that look like? So I think ensuring that you are applying the 9-box with the appropriate lens, it's a great tool. I love using that for talent mapping and succession planning for sure.
And so I think one of the challenging parts with performance reviews too, and this is a topic that I think it's hard. I think to do it right is hard. I'll just put it this way. Like it's easy to put together like some kind of survey or like a one type of metric that it maybe isn't necessarily ideal. Like I think on talent acquisition, it could be really hard, for instance, like to do performance reviews for recruiters, because recruiters might be recruiting for different roles. So you can't just have like a metric like number of hires.
Time to fill, or
right.
Because like if you're hiring executive talent, it's going to take way longer than it's going to take, mid or junior level talent. For sure.
So there's definitely nuance that has to be built in, but I think too, it's like there could be manager bias, right? Like there could be different things where it's like not necessary, or the managers may not understand the nuance that we just discussed, or maybe they understand it, but they haven't built out like a measuring system that is so from a CPO perspective that's running a large organization, like how do you kind of ensure that the way that those like performance management, performance reviews are being done properly, so you can actually truly identify the people that should be moving up within the organization? Do you have any advice there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say there's a few things. One would be make sure that the tool you're using is easy to use, because like, here's one thing that I see a lot in terms of organizations is that they have, a fully built out performance review process, but then the tool is really hard to use and clunky to use, and it will take a manager forever, and then they won't do it.
Yeah.
So like that is like step one. If you have a tool that's like just, moderately okay, I would still say focus on training your managers to make sure they understand the vernacular, the potential pitfalls for bias in their reviews, making sure that they understand kind of the rating system and how to appropriately assess their staff. And then also ensuring that they don't have like some sort of like recency bias, right? Like John performed really, really well over the last month, so they give them this glowing review, but the other 11 months wasn't so great. So I would say smart. Just kind of like a refresh in terms of how to conduct a performance review and the vernacular and kind of like the terms that we're using and how to avoid bias in your assessments. Would be probably the best.
I think that's the hardest. Like you have people that aren't like managers aren't necessarily qualified or trained on running performance 100%. Reviews properly, nor are they on talent acquisition. And then it's like, how do you, and the larger the organization, the harder it is to, I feel like, keep things in line. And like, to me, this is what a people first culture means. Like, I think sometimes CEOs, for instance, might think people first culture is this kind of fluff thing that doesn't impact.
Oh, totally. Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, well, no, there's actually like, there's things you can execute on that are people first, that are going to directly impact the performance of your team. And a
Absolutely.
lot of it's like if you got to remove bias from performance review process. Bias could take a lot of forms. When it comes to, you could look at everything from unconscious bias with DE and I efforts to performance biases to recency biases. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to like look for that are actually going to directly impact how effective your team is at achieving the North Star metrics. I think that there's
Yeah.
just, so much opportunity from a people first perspective. I mean, hiring best practices, the quality of your team. I mean, like if you look at like a
Yeah.
sports team, like everybody understands like the concept of like a draft and the concept of you need the best people to win championships. Like
Mhm.
it's not nobody, like I don't feel like that is lost upon anybody. But
Yeah.
like think about the amount of recruiting and effort it takes to get those amazing people on the team so you can win the damn game. And I don't feel
Totally.
like we put that same, like companies aren't like they're like, we need to get somebody to do this. It's like, no, you want a high leverage value creator in the role that can achieve like incredible results. Like, and that takes
Absolutely.
a lot of intention and it requires buy-in from the entire organization, and hiring managers need to be doing their stuff. And I think that's so hard for people. It's like people teams. It's like we're accountable for hiring and talent management. Like literally the core of the business is the team, but
Mhm.
yet our results are tied to the hip with how the rest of the organization is run.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so you had said something interesting there about, with sports, we know that we have to like find the best players, but also, right, I read something about if you have let's use basketball, for example, if you have 5 superstars on the court, right, they actually don't win as many games, as
That's true.
if you don't have like your utility players in the game, right? If you don't have like what's the name, John Harden in the game, right? Like if you don't have him, then your team might not perform as well. So I think also as part of like your talent acquisition strategy, what is the makeup of your team? Where are the gaps? Like before you even hire. So like this is
Mhm.
one of the biggest things. I feel really passionate about it if you can't tell. One
Yeah,
of
I
the
love
big
it.
things, one of the big things is like, okay, somebody leaves and you need to hire somebody into the role. You need to replace the role. Actually assess the role. Is this what you really need based off of the current team makeup and what your clients need and what you're like, is this the right role or do you need to change it? Because you can do that. So I think there's part of that, but you're absolutely right. I think the talent acquisition teams can get really frustrated with hiring managers that aren't kind of showing up and doing their best, because even though it's like so crucial to the success of the business, if there isn't full buy-in from the CEO down, your talent acquisition is going to struggle for sure.
So I guess like, do you have any other advice just to slow down on this on how to ensure that hiring managers, Daniel Chait said the funniest thing on his episode you probably heard. He was like, there's two things that hiring managers struggle with. It's hiring and managing. And like, and both
He's
of them
right.
are right. Like, you know, and both of them, like you need them to do effectively so that you can run an effective people. Or do you have any other kind of advice on how you can ensure that your managers are delivering on the performance reviews in the right way, delivering on hiring in the right way,
Mhm.
are aligned with the initiatives that you give to the organization?
Yeah. So I think I'm really big on giving context. And like share again, information sharing, why doing something is important and how it benefits you, manager. So I'm really big on that. I'm also big on ensuring that, you know, we're training people in the appropriate way. So if you're going to be, involved in hiring, you're trained up on it. So you understand, again, the context behind why you need to get back to us with your feedback. And why we can't just like wait forever because the candidate's going to accept another offer somewhere else or whatever. And I would say also probably like one of the most effective ways is how are you incenting your managers and your leaders? Are you incenting them based off of candidate experiences? Are you assessing them and incenting them based off of employee experiences and engagement? And are you looking at turnover on the team, right? So like there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different levers that you can pull, but I would say ultimately look at how you're incenting your people, because if you are particularly your leaders, if you are incenting them to do the right things, then you will often see a positive result.
Love it. Love it. And so let's go into, I would love to transition for the next segment.
Sure. Yeah.
Parallels between excellent employee experiences and excellent customer experiences.
Mhm.
High level philosophically, would love to get your thoughts on this and then dive into some more specifics.
Sure. So I think one of the things that I have seen, particularly where I am right now, is that I think when I first came in, there was almost a disconnect between employee experience and customer experience. And in reality, they should be tied at the hip, right? Because oftentimes, great employee experiences lead to great customer experiences, and it impacts the bottom line in a really positive way. So that's kind of where philosophically I feel like your employee experience needs to be tied very closely with customer experience for sure.
For sure. And so what are some of the things specifically that people should be thinking about when it comes to employee experience, and what are some
Yeah,
of the highest leverage wins, right, that we can
sure.
as executives do to provide a solid employee experience?
Yeah. So like back to your point about, sometimes executives or CEOs, see this as like a fluffy, like puppies and rainbows thing. It's actually not. So this is not about necessarily making employees happy. While that's important, yes. It's more high value than that. I would say understanding what your employees' pain points are in order to deliver for the client or the customer. So an example might be, again, I really like focused on systems. If you can't tell, if the system by which they need to deliver something to the client is not working properly, if they have to go through a lot of jump through a lot of hoops to kind of deliver great work, that can be a huge pain point. So one of the things that I will say is that I feel like oftentimes HR is very focused on employee happiness. Well, yes, that's super important. We want to make sure our people are happy because we want to retain them. We also want to make sure that we are removing those frustrations and those pain points. So what are they? And I think a lot of times HR doesn't focus as much on things that are outside of the traditional HR purview, but they really should be, right? Because that is where you're going to have the highest level impact, particularly with your customers and clients.
Yeah, I really love that distinction. Of course, like we want folks to be happy, but just like in life, like with how we prioritize on an individual level, it's like, yeah, we want to be happy, but there's other things that we're thinking about too. Like we're thinking about impact and relationships, and sometimes we're balancing all of these different things to try to produce a fulfilling life. And so it's a balancing act. I think that is a true disconnect. I think sometimes I do speak with people leaders, not as much at like the CPO level,
Mhm.
but when you go down a couple of notches to maybe on the director level, I
Yeah.
still sometimes see a disconnect where it's like too far in the direction of being like an advocate for the people. And I think it's like, as a
Yes.
C-level, we need to remember that your team is the executive team. Your
Mhm.
goals are the North Star metrics.
Mhm.
And of course you want to provide good experiences, but it's through the lens of what experiences do we need to provide in order to achieve our North Star metrics.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I mean, I think it's like we did a panel episode with a few of my team members here at Secure Vision. And my team, just for background, like we do contract recruiting, embedded recruiting, and RPO. We've done it for over 150 companies. And so that's just so my perspective, right? Like, and where I'm coming from. So for my team, like we offer fully remote. The
Yeah.
team loves it.
Yep.
And the team, I think somebody on my team was just like, hey, I love that that's a part of our culture and a value that we have.
Mhm.
And I just level set. I was like, look, I appreciate that. But to be clear, it's not necessarily a value I have. The
Yeah.
reason that I did that is because I need to attract the best people. The best people are going to produce the best results for my customers. The decision was made based off attracting and retaining the best folks. And in our industry, it's a lever that I can use to attract great people.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like through the lens of like, not it's
I
not an
know.
inherent value. I'm just saying like that's
Right.
not how decisions should be made. I think the
Yes,
disconnect is like
absolutely.
one of several reasons why people may not make it from a director to a VP level is
100%. Yes. Like there needs to be also like when you're making your case, right? You are able to decide that for you, right, for your company, James. But
right.
in terms of like how I have to operate, right? For example, at BCW in North America, we have 8 days a month in the office, which is a huge selling point for us. But again, it's from a talent attraction and retention standpoint. Am I glad that everybody really likes it? And I get to take advantage of it too. I'm working from home today, right? Like I take advantage of it too, but it's about flexibility and attracting really great talent and keeping really great talent. Flexibility is a huge lever that we can pull.
Yeah. I like, and that's that's the executive mindset. And so that's like, as much as I love the praise from my team, I was like, well, look, I also want to be transparent with you. Like, I am very happy that you're happy.
Sure. Yeah.
And also at the same time, I'm going to make a business decision based off what's ultimately going to drive us forward. And I think you want a leader that's thinking that way. Like, how are we going to grow? Because ultimately, when we grow, employees are going to thrive. They're going to have more growth opportunities within their role. One of the things that we talked about is and the prep call was getting in like to a little bit about budgeting.
Yes.
And I think that that's another area where HR, people teams, talent acquisition can have a hard time showing ROI.
100%. Yes.
Either that's like the potential value creation or opportunity cost, or I'm curious, like, how do you go about preparing budgets and making sure that you have the right financing to deliver on what a people first culture actually means, which is like what we're getting to. It's like a people first culture is about doing the right people things so that you can achieve North Star metrics. So how do you go about proving that value in like a relatively accurate dollar amount?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it's essential for a CPO particularly to be as aware of the numbers as our CFO, right? Like I work very, very closely with our CFO. And everything we do, there's a data component too. So like, again, kind of going back to that art and science balance, right? We might be making the case to kind of implement different people programs or, have new systems or enhance our systems. But there's a reason for that. And there's always a dollar amount attached to it, whether it is the cost, the opportunity cost, whether it's the return on our investment, whether it's potential turnover numbers and what that would cost. There's a way of making a calculation. You have to be careful, right? There's a way of calculating the cost or the benefit of everything. So I work very closely with our CFO because I want to make sure I'm calculating it the best way I can. But I would say that it's super important for a CBO to be really, really well aware of your number, like know your numbers, or any HR leader really. Like if you aren't making your case using analytics and data, that's a problem.
Right. Yeah. It's not like I need more budget because we're behind on the hiring plan. It's like,
right. Or I need more budget because I want to do, you can pick anything. I want to have a party for people. Okay. Why? What is the reason? Like what is the kind of return on that? So I would say kind of like critically looking at all of your expenses and also your strategic plan from like a business standpoint. How is your people plan aligning to the strategic plan and what funds do you need in order to get there? And then how are you making that case? Everything we do. And my team is probably, they've gotten used to it now because I've been there for a while, but I'm constantly, especially when I first joined, okay, well, what's the reason? Why do you want to do this? What's the benefit? What's the numbers? What's the analytics behind it? And they're just like, they know if they're going to be proposing something to me, I want to know the numbers. I want to know the data.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, if you can't prove a true ROI, then it's not the right project.
then you shouldn't
I mean,
be doing
straight
it.
up, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah,
It's that simple.
totally.
Well, hey, Colleen, this has been a great episode. I'm really happy that you were able to come on today, and I hope everybody tuning in, make sure you're taking this episode, dropping it into Slack channels, sharing with your team. We really appreciate the support, and there's a lot of good stuff in here to implement. So, Colleen, thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much, James.
Cool. All right. And for everybody tuning in, keep a lookout for official announcements on some partnerships that we got coming out. I already kind of leaked the greenhouse thing today. So that is coming. And then I'm working on a few more strategic partnerships. I don't have commitments yet, but they're with like category leading companies that are affiliated with basically the mission of building great organizations through hiring the best possible people and making sure that they're empowering them. So from a technology standpoint, primarily. So yeah, anyways, more of that to come. It's going to be really, really cool. We're going to continue to elevate the show and add even more value. Next year is going to be crazy cool too. We're going to start doing live recordings with audiences of top executives in the world that are passionate about these topics. So there's just a lot of cool things happening. So anyways, we'll see you next time. Take care.